We're going to look at some ancient megaliths here again, but these are going to be in Mexico and Bolivia. And people look at a lot of the Aztec art and stuff that you see nowadays, some of the megalithic walls that almost look like marshmallows all stuck together but flattened, and things. And you see that type of structures all around the world. And I have a correlating video on that too. But in that fact, there is a lot that is lost to time, just like anybody else. Once people got real hip to the Aztec and Mayan thing, just like the Egyptians, they came in and were taking stuff left and right at first, and it took professionals getting in there and trying to stop the situation. But of course, people finding finds that were way away and no one knew about was still continuing, and still perhaps continues to this day. But some of these artifacts I want to show you are things that you can't see anymore. You won't see them in a museum. You won't see them anywhere. They've either been picked up, the smaller ones are picked up and used by the locals for buildings, usage and things like that. And the larger ones are the ones that couldn't be picked up. Now, a lot of these are deep under the ground now. Indeed, this exact picture right here, I don't know if you can really make out all the holes that are behind this in a succession of runs. But they found a wiggle in the ground right here, and one piece was sticking a little corner out of the ground. So they dug that up, then they dug up the next one, they dug up the next one, and there are artifacts in every single one of these all lining up, and these are columns and pillars. And what's unique about this, and this one especially, I don't know if you see the yardstick there and you can make out the measurements, but we're looking at 9 feet tall. This thing is 9 feet tall and square. You look at the symmetry of it and how well it's done, how beautiful it's carved out. It's incredible, isn't it? And it's really a giant basin, which looks very much like a sink of today somewhat, where it's got a sunken in area in there, and it only is about 4 or 5 inches high. And you would pour water into there, and it would spill out in that artificial spout that's there. And the unique thing I want to show you here is that you think the Romans are the only ones that had concrete and things, but now we know there's a lot of plasters and concretes that were going on way back at Egypt time, and the concrete super strong stuff was of course made with Cretan ash. That's the reason the word concrete is with crete. Con is with, as in chili con carne is chili with beans, and so this, or chili with meat, this here shows you the top of it, which is actually professed to be concrete. That little structure that's around the top that's molded into the spout there, and it kind of looks like concrete, or it's unfinished, but it was said to have been concrete. And the thing that came along with it, this is a 9 foot tall drain spout, right? And square drain spout, and it has concrete spout. And you don't think they had concrete, so that's just wickedly unique, and I had to show that to you here. But let's look at some of these other pictures that we've got here. I actually have over an hour of this, but I'm going to try not to bore you with all of it. I want to show you some things like these 2 pillars here. These are the 2 pillars leading into the entrance of the temple that they had there. Now, let me see if I can contrast this down a little bit. That hopefully fixed it for you a little bit. If you'll look, this right here is a doorway a man can go in. Right here. These are giant blocks that are all right here. Giant blocks, and bigger blocks. And then what the hell are these? You would think that they would have had to have taken a rock that was existing there and sculpted it down to that, and then put all these rocks that they built in between it or something. There's no way they're going to get that thing in there. That thing is 40 foot tall. It is huge. It is on the line of perhaps the Baalbek stones that are out there. Now, I say that, but I believe this is only the top half of a doorway. but it would have been way too tall for people, something that you could stick up your arms and go through, taller than our current doorways. But it would have been the top half. There would have been a bottom half that just had a side, and then this going through it, because this stick over here, if I'm reading this correctly with the lines and dashes, there's 10 foot, there's 20 foot, that's about 26, 28 foot coming out from there. Lord knows how deep it goes into the ground right there too, but probably another 5 foot, maybe even 10, to give it stance and holdability there. But amazing monoliths. But these are the two pillars that are in front of very many temples back in the days, whenever they had a shoa, and the poles out in front of the Hebrew temples, and they had the obelisks out in front of the pyramids. So let's look at more of this so we can just see how megalithic this is, and some of these sites that are very telling. A few important pictures that we'll get to here in a few moments, but this is just pictures of the area and mesa tops and how you get to someplace, and how somebody had cut. I don't know if you can see this, but somebody has cut and made that a flat cut right down through there. Like, this is actually where they quarried some of the stone from. And there's a beautiful flat cut right down through there. It's got to be about 30 foot wide. Somewhere around there, 30 foot wide. And I don't know, man, over 100 feet long. And they were quarrying out just a section there that left a flattened wall. Looks like somebody just took a laser and incised it off of there. Cut out ditches and trenches, and the ditches and trenches are inlaid around it with all these pillars that have a fat long one and then a tall, fat long tall, fat long tall. Some of them are missing, some of them are broken off, but it goes here, it goes there. There's another one over there that shape comes out. It's you know, but none of this exists anymore, by the way. Some of these sites are mentioned here. Other ones are telling you just how far away it is, and it's this far east of this place, and 25 miles east of this. Now, this is the Temple of the Sun that you've seen this before on Ancient Aliens and things like that, and you can see this is the shape that it was in when they found it, and it didn't change too much. And some of the locals had come and gotten stones from there, but not too much, and all these stones they could carry. Of course, they got to carry them all the way back, so it doesn't make it really worth it too much, as much you have to put into it. And then it makes you wonder how the hell they carried them all here in the first place and why. But this Temple of the Sun God here, it's put back together now. You can still see the crack that's evident in it, but see how this is behind this now? It's all laid off and dug more down into the ground. They flattened all this out, and then somebody has taken and pried that back up like it's supposed to be. And here again, it shows you that thing is over 20 foot tall. But it had a higher top that was cracked off on it. Now look at these insets that are on here. These double insets. This is so hard to do. Stoneworker people today can't do these double insets. Even this giant temple entrance right here has this inset line that runs around it. They're doing a double inset, like that's where the door would inset, right? Right. Now, you don't find the thing that connects a door that would be on a hinge type of thing in any way, shape, or form, but there was something here that probably made it flush to it and made it into a door set. And you see this notch over here, and this notch over here, and the poles that would be going across, these beams, and going to the next stasis top, halfway across it, and then another beam from there to the next one, and each one's steepled on the top. And they even use that dimpling top of the rock structure hold together pattern that they do in Stonehenge, where they've got those little nipples sticking up and the rock stick on them. But also they have the same pyramid design of the cut-in key marks that almost look like an hourglass or a T, and they pour metal into there to hold them together. Now these are strange, almost phallic shaped looking guys that are all, deities that are holding their arms up, and it's very reminiscent of the way the arm structure is and the way they hold to the Gobekli tepe arms, and the people have the structures there if you've looked at it, and the ancient mounds they have there. But also it's very indicative of Easter Island, and the flat top and the extra crest thing that's on top. I mean, you see this, and their arms clasped in front of them. It's strangely reminiscent of that. Not quite as heavy of a people. And I tell you something. I went to a Belize whenever I was younger, and it was before it got all touristed out so bad. And I was talking to one of the guys there and stuff, and asked him about all the neat things I could go and see. And he told me that 20, 30 minutes away from there, he could show me an ancient Olmec statue that looked a lot like this kind of. It was a little more squared off, a little more honcho, kind of looking wider. And he said it was buried and that they had found it. And so we went up the road, and then we stopped and had to get out and walk. And we walked up over a couple of ridges, down through a valley, and then stayed in that valley, went all the way up. And it was more than 20 minutes worth of walking from the car, but I guess he wanted to get me there. And we walked up this ridge, and as we did, we found one of these that was uncovered like this, and it was solo, and I saw nothing else around it whatsoever, but it had been dug out, and it was more than waist deep in the ground when it had been dug out, and it was on an angle. And he told me that that is the reason that the rope thing that they had for everybody on, the pulley deal that they had for everybody, was built over there instead of here. And I said, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could, like, zip line right over this thing and whatever and stuff? And he goes, no, no, no. This isn't supposed to be here. I didn't know what he meant at the time, kind of. I was like, like, did somebody take and put it here or whatever, And he kind of ended around and started talking about other things. And that whole little sentence right there, this isn't supposed to be here, which I took at the moment to be kind of like, hey, you're not supposed to find shit like this. And when you do, you can't build nothing because it's like, ooh, ancient Indian burial mounds or something. Actually meant that this is the wrong place for anything like this to actually be sitting, for what archaeologists think. Anyhow, I'm just gonna go on from there with it. But this one here is about 15, 16 foot tall. The one that I saw was only about maybe 7 or 8 foot tall. It was definitely taller than me, bigger than me, but not much. I mean, I could jump up and probably touch the top of the head easy. Wasn't like wasn't near 9 or 10 foot like a basketball, bottom of a net or anything like that. Now look at the size of these stones here. Again, none of this is here anymore. But how huge these stones are and how they're quarried out as being just a total square and flat entity. Now I want you to imagine that you just take a chunk of something. Let's call it wood, even though in this case it's something much harder to cut, and we'll call it, which is stone. But let's call it wood. And let's say that what you're going to do is you're going to have to cut off a wafer out of that piece of wood. And when you cut that wafer off, it's of course going to be a whole bunch of wobbly stuff on one side and have a flat edge, right? So it'd look like, you cut a grapefruit in half. One side of the grapefruit's going to be that rock, and the other side's going to be that nicely cut off piece, right? Like you see there. And can you imagine now finding a way to flip that thing over and then cut the other side exactly perpendicular to where it leaves the whole thing where it's a little over 2 foot thick uniformly all the way around it? And then of course the ends all the way around the edges are going to be wobbly anyhow because they haven't been cut yet. Now you've got to figure out a way to stand the thing on its end and then cut it square to the 2 cuts that you have that are currently square, and then another cut on the other side that's perpendicular to that the whole thing is all square. This is definitely a Masonic knowledge type thing that it takes somebody, even if you had the equipment to be able to pull this off would be incredible. But these people are Bronze Age people that you can't do this with. And I know they have little thin cords that you put sand and stuff on, and you pull them back and forth, and it'll cut through stone. But I don't know where they're getting this badass rope from, and does it have diamonds in it? They put sand there, they do other things. We don't see a lot of things that they could have used to do this. It would have to take a machine. They were pulling a wheel like a bandsaw, in cutting through these things, or being able to push them along through a stationary object like a bandsaw. And if this thing was the size of your hand, it'd be difficult to cut that nice. But this thing is 15 foot across, and the one in the middle is 15 foot across and 20 foot long. And then it's got insets into it that's almost laser precision, and that's from thousands of years ago. And it still has the edges that are fine, very fine edged. Of course, that's probably due to the lack of climate problems there, but let's continue. You know, just that anomaly there. See this inset, all these inserts, these double inserts, almost looks like these are pockets, and you can pull things out or inset things into them that would be recessed but flush, and crosses. And so in this photo here, these are crosses that are double inset. It is hard for people to do this, but you find this exact same thing in Ethiopia. It's a giant church cut into the ground. It's not a cross. It looks like this. This is an ancient symbol for Saturn. This is the same symbol that the Egyptians used for homes, where it's X marks the spot, though it's more turned on its side than straight up and down. So whenever they talk about Kemet, they always put this symbol after it, and it kind of means like there's X, and that's kind of where everybody got X marks the spot when they started cartographing maps. But you see the end of this one right here. Hopefully you can see this. You see that little T stuck onto there. There'd be a rock up against it with another T next to it, and they would actually pour metal into there and it'd make a solid brace that would hold these things together, almost make it somewhat earthquake proof. And just unique architecture and structure on a total square by square by square. Then you got to carve it to do all those things. And this looks like a laid out floor, but it's really these things having all fallen over, and these giant walls that are very far apart. You can tell there was artwork on some of this. Most of this has no decoration whatsoever. Some pieces have this type of decoration. This is almost exactly what that man was that I saw that it looks like. Only you could still see the facial features on it somewhat, and somewhat of a cheekbone thing. In mine, this was all recessed a little bit, and the nose stuck out just a little still, but this could be all eroded from there. And yet, it had two things there. On this guy, it almost looks like a fish and a deal. On mine, it looked like a scroll and a cup. And again, this very reminiscent of these Easter Islanders. And of course, Easter Island, if you just go from here to the coast and go straight out, you're going to run into Easter Island. Well, hopefully you will. And I think that's how Easter Islanders got started. But let's continue from here in just a few more minutes. I want to show you something else and give you another conceptive idea. Look at these recesses. And I'll show you what it looked like where some of these temples are that are now totally... Here's a local. And almost has hobbit feet, by the way. The people wanted to note that his feet were way bigger than... Even though he was only 5'4", his feet were like size 16 shoes. And it's probably from climbing in the mountains and stuff. And these people used to eat cocoa leaves and climb in the mountains. Here's a unique site where water used to collect, and still does, in the very top here. You can see where they walked down a ramp, and they built the city over here around it. So this is one of the unique cities that they don't have built very close to a river or water source. This is a little mountain that had a pool in it, and it looks like it's been artificially helped quite a bit. But now time has taken it back over and it melted. And if you really look at this and how it squares in, square, 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 that's actually just some structure built that was more mud bricky, and it's all melted and eroded over time, and it's from a long, long, long time ago. Longer than 1100 AD, or whatever we thought these people were from. You can see that. Here's pieces at Pumapunku and how they fit together and make the walls that they have with all their intricate cuts. And each one's within a 1/16 of an inch of being exactly the same as all the other ones. Like it's a cloning thing. Real hard to pull off without diagrams. Here's some megaliths outside the front of another temple that are a little smaller than those first ones I showed you, but entrance to the temple about 10 foot tall. You can see the height of the statue that's here. Just giant megaliths, right? The the structure you see there is of course Spanish, but the two things that are out front of it are not. These are not faces, chairs, inserts, insets that look like Pumapunku. Look at these that have the little dolls on the end of them. They have the little notches and holes on the end of them. And of course these would match up to another one that had a rod in it. And they're stuck on there, kind of that Stonehenge claspy thing I was talking about. And this has got them too. You don't see much of this, and this site doesn't exist anymore. They found this all out. But here's another temple that they found. It's kind of out of representation, but it's in Tiwanaku. Now, Tiwanaku is Tiwanaku, and strangely, that name sounds like an island name that my father went to whenever he was in the service, called Taiwan. In fact, Taiwan Aku, and Aku is a land. So this is like the Taiwan land, whatever Taiwan means in their language. I wonder if that means the same thing as Taiwan means in Taiwanese. But this temple thing here is shown out of proportion. You see these steps that go up to a flat, and these steps that go up to a flat, and you see how big these guys are. Unless this thing they're in is made for, dwarves and midgets or something, then that's out of proportion desperately. But they are showing how they're measuring it. This is one of the cartographer guys showing a measurement, and then you're showing a festival from the locals where they had these pontoons over their heads and they were watching it. Here's that inserted doorway we're talking about, and how do you get that there, and how did somebody just lean this stuff up? And you look at these walls and the way that they had them built, and these cut holes, inserts, insets, and these are all hand-drawn pictures from back in the days of lithography and stuff. In the 1900s, people were down there doing this. These inserts here that have this geometric design, which are almost exactly the same, and megalithic walls that they've got, and how the stones fit exactly together with no signs how they do it, done it, whatever. Another description or showing of that sun temple, and you can see how it's off kilter and offset, that they fixed it now. Inserts that look like windows, but they're like false windows. Almost looks like a Roman type of look. Let's go to Teotihuacan. I want to show you a few pictures out of here. Here's an important one right here. So this is the way it looked in about 2002, right down here. But this mound of earth, just a ball of dirt, just a rounded off hump, that looks much like Gobekli Tepe, and about 70 other mounds of different sizes, some even very pyramidical, like the thing you see on the bottom, just covered up with vegetation, are all over Europe. And there's about that many more through Northeast Asia and into China that we don't get to look at. But you can look up Chinese pyramids, and you can see where they're actually literally planting. They're covering them up and then planting over them like it's a garden, in a way that I think they want them to be hidden for all time. And you wonder why, and you look into it, and whenever they open up the burials, they find a Caucasian with long hair. A few of them have been blonde haired. They have these blue discs over their eyes whenever they're dead, and they sunk down into their eye sockets, so maybe signifying that they even had blue eyes. Perhaps these are the Aryans of old time, but that's the reason they don't dig into them, and they leave them alone. Now, a lot of them are, of course, from the different dynasties of Japan, but this mound here is very telling. There's a lot of mounds around the world, and Gobekli Tepe itself has a a mound effect that's very much like this. And when they dug off into the corner of it, they end up finding that Stonehenge ring that they've found now, and they realize, oh my God, it's hooked up to another one. There's an estimated 50 Stonehenge rings that all have like a zodiacal reference to them, and it's not our common zodiac, but it's the Sumerian zodiac. And that kind of makes sense because in the Sumerian tales they talk about the lords of Arata, and this actually is right there in Arata and the Caucasus Mountains area and right near Nimrod Dag, so the mountain of Nimrod, that's supposedly the Kushites and the Kush Mountains that are there, you know. So anyhow, just real telling how they didn't know that was there. It was just a mound of dirt. When they dug into it, it became the temple of the sun. So you can see how this complex used to look in that first picture. They dug it out somewhat, and that ended up laying out to what you see today over here. And it did just look like that little mound of dirt, which you still see the left side of it still not been uncovered. They hit this side pretty well. Ends up being the entire structure that you see here. So what's up under those mounds, like here? On this area, there was another little mound there. When they dug it out, it ended up becoming the temple here, which I think that's the temple of the moon, but it looks too flat. The temple of the moon's taller than that. There's a better picture of it somewhat. You can see the size of it, but it was all caught inside that whole mound you see around it is one just little lump type thing. So, interesting. And yeah, here's an ad that comes in on my thing, so I had to stop it. But those mounds that are there, that's something we need to get into. We need to dig into some of those. And I think after we dig into a couple of them, we'll probably want to dig into some more of them. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. And there'll be another vid that comes out made out of the next vid that comes after this. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.